They're from Georgia. And they're fighting the Germans. Okay. Why do you sound surprised? Because they were fighting with the Germans before? Wait. Georgians were fighting... Oh, no, I see. Georgians. Yeah, Georgians. Right. Hey, I bet they got there on the midnight train, huh? The midnight train... Never mind. No, too soon. Yeah, 25 years too soon. Okay. Uh-huh. Bye. Superstar, but it didn't get far. Great song. May 25th, 1945. The German invasion of Poland, September 1st, 1939, within days drew in nations from around the world into this Second World War. The war in China, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific became parts as well. We've seen fighting all over North Africa, the Middle East, India, and this week, it is now 300 weeks since this World War began. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Americans advanced on Okinawa. Though off Okinawa, kamikazes continued to play havoc with American shipping, several times hitting American admirals' flagships. On Luzon in the Philippines, American and Filipino forces took the Ipoh Dam, which will hopefully ease Manila's water issues, and plans were getting ever more concrete for just how and when, and whom, troops by the millions would be transferred from Europe to the Far East for the war there. The German surrender was 2 weeks ago, but they're still fighting in Europe this week. Well, ending this week, as it turns out. On the 20th, the Georgian uprising on Tezel ends. This actually began back on April 5th. Tezel is the largest of the Dutch West Frisian Islands, and was of course occupied by the German army for several years, and was pretty heavily fortified. The Georgian battalion is former Red Army soldiers from Georgia SSR captured on the Eastern Front and given the choice between prison camp or service in the Wehrmacht. They chose the latter. They've been in the Netherlands since August 1943 and in Tezel since February this year. In late March, plans were made to transfer them to the mainland to actively fight Allied advances, which perhaps, though I don't know for sure, caused the rebellion. There's also the fact that since they're in German service, they will be seen as traitors at home, so a rebellion might give them a shot at either possible rehabilitation or maybe a surrender to the Western Allies. Anyhow, they rise up under the command of Shalva Lolaje late April 5th and take control of almost the entire island, killing some 200 German soldiers. They have assistance from the local resistance, but they do not secure the naval batteries at the north and south coasts. The Germans there are very much alive. They begin fighting back with their big guns, and 2,000 German riflemen are deployed from the mainland. They might not have been such an issue had an expected Allied landing arrived, but it doesn't. So over the next few weeks, the Germans comb the island and kill all the Georgians they can find. Local farmers manage to hide some of them, and others take refuge by hiding in the coastal minefields. But the German surrender of the Netherlands, and even the complete German surrender to the Allies, does not stop the hunt for the Georgians. Only the arrival of the Canadians this week on the 20th, who disarmed the Germans, ends the situation. The 228 still surviving Georgians are turned over to the Soviet authorities. The rebellion has done an awful lot of damage locally, with dozens of farms being burned to the ground. 120 locals have been killed, along with 565 Georgians and over 800 Germans. Today, the 25th, the Battle of Odzak ends. This is actually the last active battle of World War II in Europe. It's been going on since April 19th and is the Croatian armed forces fighting and losing to the Yugoslav army. I will not go into it here because this is covered in depth in our War Against Humanity series with Spartacus Olsson, so go and check that out for the details. I'm going to do something different now. I often have some notes near the end of an episode, but today I have a bunch of notes from Europe that I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way before I turn my attention to the other side of the world. On the 21st, Heinrich Himmler is arrested. He's trying to pass a checkpoint manned by freed Soviet POWs under British command, using a fake ID and posing as a common soldier. He's remanded to British custody and identified the 23rd. That evening, he commits suicide with a cyanide capsule. On the 22nd, Reinhard Gehlen, Hitler's most senior surviving intelligence officer, surrenders to the Americans. That same day, 400 tons of German rocket equipment starts getting sent to Antwerp. From there, it will go to New Mexico. Minor spoiler, this finishes before June 1st. It kind of has to. See, it's being sent from Nordhausen, and on June 1st, the British, French, Americans, and Soviets will begin running their specifically established zones of occupation. Nordhausen is in the Soviet zone. On the 23rd, Britain's Labour Party decides not to maintain the coalition government until after the end of the whole war. Winston Churchill resigns so he can prepare for the upcoming election, forming a caretaker government to hold office until that happens. This ministry is Conservatives, National Liberals, and a few non-party affiliates like Lord Woolton, but no Labour ministers. Churchill does continue carrying on the day-to-day functions of a Prime Minister, though he's not formally appointed to run the caretaker government until next week on the 28th. Also the 23rd, the British capture and arrest most of what's left of the Flensburg government. This is the German government formed by Karl Doenitz after Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels killed themselves. Doenitz operated out of the Murvik Naval Academy in Flensburg near the Danish border from May 3rd, hence the name. Once the German unconditional surrender took effect the 8th, they didn't exactly have a lot of meaningful work to do. But for the next 3 weeks, they continued to meet until the British round them up this week. And on the 24th, Robert Ritter von Greim, the last commander of the Luftwaffe, or what little was left of it when it was under him, commits suicide in prison in Salzburg. And now I shall turn my attention to the war in the Far East and the Pacific. On Okinawa, the Americans keep no man's land lit up at night with flares and star shells to guard against Japanese small unit infiltrations and even company-sized bayonet charges. There are also instances of Japanese putting on captured American uniforms and helmets and then just casually strolling into American lines before opening fire. An even bigger problem by now is the dead bodies and the decay and the filth everywhere. William Manchester, Marine and aspiring writer, notes, if you put more than 250,000 men in a line for 3 weeks with no facilities for the disposal of human waste, you're going to confront a disgusting problem. We were fighting and sleeping in one vast cesspool. The maggot situation is extreme. There are maggots everywhere and in everything. U.S. 6th Marine Division spends the week battering away at Sugarloaf Hill. The Japanese call it Amakudai. This ridge is like 300 meters long and like 30 high, and honeycombed with tunnels that give the Japanese interlocking fields of fire against all comers. It's also pretty important. If the Americans can take it, they'll have a much better path to flank and surround Shuri Castle. They've been hitting it since the 16th, but at the end of the week, it is still in Japanese hands. Well, they take what they call the Horseshoe the 21st, but Half Moon Hill, the highest hill, remains uncaptured. Some units from 6th Marine Division head southwest towards Naha, Okinawa's largest city. As for the attacks against Flat Top Hill and Chocolate Drop positions that began last week, the Japanese were solidly established on top with mortars, 47mm guns, which were effective against American tanks, excellent defensive positions, and, as was nearly the case throughout the Pacific Theater by May 1945, universal acceptance of death. 77th and 96th Divisions have been hitting it with everything they have since the 13th, and finally Flat Top Hill falls the 20th. Meanwhile, the 1st Marine Division is slowly eating up the ridges and draws that lead to Shuri Heights, relying on grenades, flamethrowers and flamethrower tanks, heavy naval support, and testing a new weapon, a shoulder-fired recoilless rocket tube that they call the bazooka. By the 21st then, Shuri is surrounded on 3 sides, north, east, and west. Southeast of Shuri lies Conical Hill, and elements of the 96th Division have been trying to take this, which would provide safe passage for the reserve 7th Division to pass around it east to west and complete the encirclement. They go into action the 21st and break into the southern sector of Okinawa. Thing is, of course the Americans want to surround and destroy the Japanese at Shuri, everyone on both sides knows that. But Japanese commander Mitsuru Ushijima does not plan on sticking around for it. He plans on vacating Shuri. On May 21st, he consulted his division and brigade commanders, who again expressed concern at the idea of a retreat by a Japanese army. Okinawa was more than strategic. It had tremendous symbolic importance. And there was the question as to where the army might go. The Chinan Peninsula was too rough and too remote. But the territory along the southern shore made sense. Supplies had been stored and positions prepared there. Above all, the southern coast offered the opportunity of waging a longer battle and thereby imposing greater attrition and damage on the American forces and postponing use of Okinawa against Japan itself. And with U.S. 7th Division breaking past Conical, if the Japanese were to be tightly surrounded at Shuri, does anyone doubt what sort of bombardment they'd be in for? So on the 22nd, the move begins, with wounded and supplies being moved the 10 kilometers or so from Shuri to the coast. There's also this, though, which works in their favor. On the 21st, heavy rains begin, which continue the rest of the week. Soldiers and Marines huddled under their ponchos, soaking and miserable. Their foxholes began to fill with water, and they bailed with their helmets. The skin on their hands and fingers was wrinkled and pellucid. Their feet, never dry, developed open sores and became slimy to the touch, and when they pulled off their boots, they found small clumps of dead flesh clinging to their wet socks. Jeeps and trucks sank to their axles, immobilized. Ammunition, provisions, and 5-gallon water cans had to be muscled up to the lines by hand through knee-deep mud, in driving rain, over fields swept by Japanese fire. Also on Okinawa, on the 24th, the Japanese launch a commando attack against Yontan airfield. 5 bombers come in low with wheels down and try to land on the field. 4 of them are shot down. The one that is not makes a good landing. And then 12 commandos get out and start destroying American planes on the ground with grenades and satchel charges. They actually destroy 9 of them, but also damage a couple dozen more. They also blow up a fuel dump on over 200,000 liters of aviation fuel. The Marine Guards chased them down through the day and the night. They finally killed the last Japanese commando just after dawn this morning. The Japanese are withdrawing on Tarakan Island as well this week, but to the north. It looks like it'll take the Australians several weeks at least to clear them. I should point out here, the main goal of attacking Tarakan with Operation Oboe 1 was making the airfield usable for future Oboe operations against Brunei. Specifically, to be able to operate a fighter wing by May 7th, an attack bomber wing by the 16th, and 2 fighter and 2 attack bomber squadrons by this week on the 21st. Airfield construction squads have been ashore from day one, but of course, they can't do their job till the airfield is in Australian hands and is not under fire from the enemy. The airfield was taken within days, however, and by now, there is no longer any enemy shelling or nighttime attacks there, but there is still absolutely no hope of using the airfield. It was mined pretty well for starters, but Allied air attacks over the months have left craters up to 3 meters deep and 18 in diameter. Lastly, it was waterlogged as the water table sat just beneath the surface. This required the craters to be emptied by pumps before any remedial work could be commenced. Continual rain hardly helped matters. Unless the craters were promptly filled, they refilled with seepage and overnight rainwater. The drainage system had been destroyed in the bombing. They brought in gravel from inland gravel pits, which is hard enough to do on the muddy dirt roads, but they're going to have to cover it with Marston mat, which is perforated steel planking, and which they have to bring over from Morotai. That is going to take time. So it really doesn't look at all like it will be operational when the landings on Borneo go off a couple weeks from now, which kind of defeats the main purpose of Tarakan in the first place. The Japanese have been withdrawing in China as well, except there, it is generally to the east. They're still scattered fighting last week and this in western Hunan. On the Xining front, it's in the Chinese favor, routing the Japanese south of Wawatung back on the 12th. When the Japanese retreated to the south, they were followed by Chinese 94th Corps, who surrounded them and caused heavy losses. Those who broke out to the east were again surrounded near Fengshenyan and destroyed. Other elements of 94th Corps stopped Japanese 34th Division's advance the 18th. On the Shaoyang front, Chinese 193rd Division captured Maopu on the 13th, but the fighting in the region over the next few days causes the Japanese to withdraw back to the east whence they came. The situation by the end of the week looks to be nearly where it was when the battle began many weeks ago. A few words about this whole fight in western Hunan. As we saw, Japan's Ishigo offensive last year gave the Japanese a route through all of China down to Indochina. Also, as we saw, it did not do wonders for their logistics and supply system. At the beginning of the year, Japanese Imperial Headquarters decided they weren't going to try and take more territory in China, and were going to guard the occupied parts of the southern coast of the country. The main reason for this was the Allies taking big chunks of the Philippines, which could then maybe be used for attacking China in an actual invasion as a springboard for hitting Japan. But Japanese commander of the Chinese Expeditionary Army, Yasuji Okamura, does not think the Allies are going to invade China. I mean, they're already bombing Japan. They attacked Iwo Jima. It looked like they're going that route. And Okinawa seems to confirm it. On top of that, he thought that if he attacked the Chinese before his supply situation got worse and theirs got much better, and it's getting better by the day, he could possibly reach Chinese nationalist capital Chongqing and knock the Chinese out of the active war. If that failed, then sure, just pull back and protect the coast from being a springboard for a Japanese home island invasion. Fine. So that's what he did. That's what these attacks have all been part of. His first target was Zhejiang town to get the airfield, which could be used for air attacks against Chongqing, or even to attack towards Kunming and the Allied supply terminus. Well, the fighting's been on like a 130-kilometer front, and the Chinese have held and more than held. On top of that, something rare in the struggle against Japan was occurring. Zhejiang became one of a string of bases stretching all the way back to Kunming, where supplies poured in. A field hospital was established to care for the wounded, and a vehicle maintenance company was set up. A network of supply points extended out from Zhejiang on both roads and navigable streams. Food, weapons, and even summer uniforms arrived at those supply points, even as portable surgical hospitals were set up to the rear of the front. And the Chinese have ground the Japanese down, even taking a supply dump last week. Okamura has by now realized that it would take a heck of a lot of reinforcements to actually win this fight. And he's not going to send them in, and will follow the orders to defend the coast. So this fight is pretty much over, and it's a big Chinese victory. Well, Chinese and American, since there have been a bunch of American military advisors here. But unlike in the years before, everyone has been cooperating very well. This is good timing for Chinese nationalist commander Chiang Kai-shek, too, since over the past 6 months or so, it has become more and more a popular opinion that his troops can't or won't fight. And there are plenty of people in the US government, especially some in China, who've been advocating over the past year towards supporting Mao Zedong and the Chinese Communists instead of Chiang, or at least demanding they form a unified front. And here, I will leave you until next week, which will be the 301st week of the World War, though the war in China has been going on quite a bit longer. But this week sees the Chinese winning in China, the Americans advancing on Okinawa, and the Japanese withdrawing, Tarakan being secured, but why did they invade it again? And the end of the final actual battles in Europe during World War II, with the organized occupation of Germany soon to begin. And this, today the 25th, the U.S. Joint Chiefs confirm November 1st as the date for the start of Operation Olympic, the invasion of Kyushu, the southernmost of the Japanese home islands. There are several possibilities afloat for what to do to actually win the war against Japan. There are those who support a total blockade and bombardment, but blockades and bombardments haven't actually won the war in the places they were tried to various degrees: Britain, Germany, China. So a total one might win the war, but it would take a lot of time, cost untold Japanese lives, which most people aren't all that concerned about outside of Japan at the moment. But importantly, guys like U.S. Army Chief of Staff George Marshall do not believe that public support can be maintained for such a long-term operation. Considering that Japanese soldiers fight to the death in pretty much every engagement, how long would a siege take to overcome the millions of soldiers on the home islands? Fleet Admiral Bill Leahy, Truman's Chief of Staff, and the most senior of the 5-star rank holders, favors a siege because that would cost the fewest American lives. Of course, the defeat of Germany has changed things. The Joint Intelligence Committee writes a report that a siege would encourage Japanese leaders to believe that resistance would encourage Allied war weariness, and if that happens, it would lead to a negotiated settlement. So they now endorse invasion as the only sure way to achieve unconditional surrender. What am I getting at here, okay? I'll tell you. One sticking point is who will run such an invasion, Douglas MacArthur or Chester Nimitz, or some combo of both. The Navy wants Nimitz to run the amphibious part. The Army is against having an admiral run the start of what would be the most complex operation of the war. Today, May 25th, 1945, they agree that the naval and amphibious parts of the operation will be under Nimitz, except in case of exigencies, which they do not expound on, which would turn command over to MacArthur. But whatever they mean, this directive, as the week ends, allows Chester Nimitz and Douglas MacArthur to finally begin coordinating plans for the invasion of Kyushu, the invasion of Japan. We should see a draft within a few days. Nearly a year ago, June 6, 1944, we dropped an entire separate series about the Allied invasion of Normandy. It followed that invasion hour by hour for 24 hours, but also contained all sorts of other stuff about all the players involved and all the background and everything. If for some reason you missed D-Day 24 hours, you can check it out right here. That whole series, and this whole series, and all our future series are possible thanks to the Time Ghost Army. The Army is what supports everything we do. Metalhead Historian is this week's Army Member of the Week. I think I'd like to meet Metalhead Historian. I like his name. And these are the newest commissioned officers in the Army, and you can join the Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.